Hello and welcome everyone to the Be Waste Wise webinar this month. As most of you all know, I'm Akanksha Singh. I'm the community builder at Be Waste Wise. And we've been organizing such waste dialogues on monthly basis, addressing the need for knowledge dissemination on waste management since 2013. We are a non-profit organization and we have been bridging this waste solution expertise gap worldwide for over a decade now. If you see the value in making such diverse sustainability dialogues, such as these, available free of charge, and request you to please support us in our mission. Every donation helps us to create, curate, and produce such waste dialogues on diverse topics. We encourage you all to please do check out our website and donate. We will also share the link for the donation page over the chat as well. Now, moving on for today's topic, we will engage in an interesting discussion with leading experts who will highlight the crucial role of waste pickers who have traditional expertise in waste management that can considerably improve the effectiveness of EPR at grassroots levels. They also collect an astounding 60% of the world's plastic for recycling. But since the waste has become a more valuable resource in a growing commercial waste management market, we have these traditional waste pickers who are being squeezed out of jobs and they have been doing quietly for years. To discuss this important issue, we have with us the panel of learned expertise who will be moderated by none other than Professor Dubey. Professor Brajesh Kumar Dubey, he's presently the professor of resource recovery and circular engineering at the Department of Civil Engineering and chair of School of Water Resources at IIT Kharagpur. He is very well known globally as a waste resource management and life cycle analysis and decarbonization expert. He, along with our learned panel today, will look at India's vast army of informal waste collectors and their critical role in decreasing the environmental impact of the country's massive waste mountain. And as well as we will also discuss the growing concern about waste pickers' livelihoods and broader initiatives to improve their working condition. We have with our panel today Bharti Chaturvedi. She is the founder and director at Chintan Environmental Research and Action Group, which is India's based non-profit gendered think tank that envisions an equitable circular society. She works in India on the cross-cutting issues of environmental justice, urban equity, and inclusion from a gendered lens. She has served on various government bodies government bodies to advise policy making, from Delhi Pollution Control Committee to Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. We welcome you, Bharti, for this session. Uh, Other than that, we have Pinky Chandran. She's a trustee at Hasiru Dala, a social impact organization working with waste pickers, the Solid Waste Management Roundtable, and a board member of SMART and TAICT in India. She leads Break Free from Plastics effort in the Asia Pacific region as well. And she has spent most of her career as a journalist, researcher, and an advisor to various organizations and social movements. Pinky also tracks policy and legal developments on issues related to waste management and its intersections. I'm very glad, Pinky, you are here to be part of this panel. Other than that, we have Aditya Vyas. He's a managing trustee at Shatakri Panchayat and representing Alliance of Waste of Indian Waste Pickers. He's responsible for developing and implementing programs that are linked to the social security of waste pickers. Other than that, we have Shantanu Sahu. He's a seasoned development professional with 14 years of expertise in sustainable waste management, wash, and alternative livelihoods. He's been working as a project officer with CE from Orissa, and he specializes in circular economy solutions, SSG empowerment, waste worker welfare, and strengthening waste management systems. Now, before we proceed to this exciting discussion, I would like to make few announcements. This webinar, as I mentioned earlier, is being recorded and will be uploaded on our website and YouTube channel. Request you all to please use the Q&A function for your questions to the panel, and use the chat function to share your views and opinions, some reports, some insights if you have, or anything related to the topic that you want to mention to the larger audience and also to the panelists, then please use the chat function for that. Now back to the panel and over to you, Professor Dubey.
So thank you, Akansha. So thank you for the introduction. And so as you know, to all our participants, we are talking about the informal waste pickers in India per se, but the topic is relevant for all the emerging economies and developing countries. So when we talk about these informal waste pickers, we all know that they do a wonderful job in terms of managing the waste in the country, but they do also face numerous challenges which they impact their health, livelihood, social standing. So for example, health and safety hazard, lack of legal recognition, social security, economic vulnerability, social stigma is also there, discrimination. There are nowadays issues of privatization and policy exclusion. That is another area which is kind of coming up, child labor and education barriers, mental health challenges. So there are a variety of issues. These are just few to list. So we have four wonderful panelists who are actually working on the ground. We are really fortunate to have our four colleagues here who have extensive experience on this particular topic. And then we have to learn from them in terms of how to understand the whole contribution of this section of the society to our waste management, and what we can do as a society so that their livelihood gets better and they get more in terms of the issues that I highlighted and the other issues that you will hear from other panelists, which is there. So without further delay, I'll go straight away and I'll request Bharati, if you can start the conversation and set the context in terms of the entire this particular topic, and share your experience of the wonderful job that you have been doing in this particular sector for last several years. So over to you, Bharti.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. I just thought I'd lay a little context out, just to understand, everyone's going to be talking of their work, and it's important to explain where all of us, where we all kind of, what's our context collectively. And if you look at it, we've had a lot of the archives, a lot of the the old archives and documents talk about people who are scavenging, and and there's a point at which they move from picking up old kinds of, and I'm talking of India really, where they move from picking up what would be low value and reusable and repairable to things which actually can be recycled. And in the 1960s, as you see an increase in plastics, you also see a few more references to waste pickers, in passing. And in cities like Delhi, you've seen several ethnic waves, which is also a global phenomenon, from Kashmiris to Tamilians in the 1990s, and of course several others after that. And the first time you really read about waste pickers, called rag pickers, incidentally, it has been a real challenge to change that name, even though it's now changed in policy, is really in the Bajaj Committee report, which is in the early 90s, where the references to these people, and the kind of occupational hazards they face. And it's just a few paragraphs, but it's the first time that there's a high level. This report comes out from what was then called the Planning Commission, which has now been upgraded to be called the Niti Aayog. And Dr. Bajaj was from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and he hadn't actually ever invested a lot of time looking at waste pickers, but he had kind of used his general awareness to put that down. And very briefly from there, and Dr. Bajaj's report absolutely created absolute waves. In the meantime, because not only was it about waste pickers, it created waves because it was the first time that a really high-ranking policy advisory agency talked of waste. And it had all kinds of new information, and a lot of people's minds were abuzz with that report. And then you see, meanwhile, in parallel, a lot of media reports, and media had at the same time in the 90s and even in the 80s sensationalized waste pickers, almost, from exoticized them, which was quite a way to report, because they were saying things like how they're picking up the gaze was really about these kind of people who are increasing the pollution because they're picking up, for example, biomedical waste, and there was very little empathy for their absolutely abject poverty. And a lot of that kind of reporting was noticed, and a lot of environmental reporters in particular did that, including in some of our leading newspapers. So you had another kind of very degrading classification. But I want to jump ahead really and talk about how continuously after the 2000 the rules in 2000, solid waste rules came in, what typically happens when these rules come in, because they're rules and you have to meet standards, the area kind of gets ring fenced, and then people make business plans out of something. Once you have a rule, you can make a business plan because the rule has to be met. It's very clearly specified what standards have to be met, and there's money to be made in it. And that was really the beginning of, I won't call it privatization because even waste workers in the informal sector are private players, but I would call it corporatization. And so when this started, there was absolutely no interest in including waste because, I mean, of course, these rules were already on the table of the scientific advisor and the ministry 3 years before they were declared. And they went through several iterations because of a court case. And those of us who used to volunteer on a parallel court case would be reading both. We were all a bunch of volunteers working on a parallel court case, which was actually far more sensational and impactful. But we would also be reading these because they were both being heard in the Supreme Court. What we found was that there was no interest in including them, despite the fact that there was enough information to show their value. So this continues happening, and then privatization just blows out. In places like Mumbai, in places like Delhi, in some parts even of Hyderabad and many other places. Now there are organizations like those of Anselm Rosario, who in fact predated a lot of this work, who actually made the effort to organize not just waste pickers, but also look at the child labor in those. So you already had models from Bangalore from the 90s. But as privatization started, there was a huge pushback. And in 2009, when the e-waste rules came out, there was a big debate. And I'm proud to say Chintan was part of pushing that debate, and also resolving that debate about how do you include the informal sector for something where you actually want it formalized. And if you read that, there are lines that allow cooperatives and associations to collect e-waste, and that was intended for basically and other such agencies to collect e-waste. It was a way to be inclusive. And of course, then we've had iterations of that again in our policy. We've had a lot of state level things happening around waste pickers. Now they're technically included. But the fact is, we have the question to ask is, what is inclusion? And for example, when Chintan was working, so Chintan really has been working with waste pickers for several years, and we've helped them organize, and now they run their own organization called Safai Sena. And what we've been looking at, and we've done research across the country, but our areas of work are basically the region of Delhi, UP. We used to work in Srinagar, or rather in Jammu and Kashmir and Rajasthan. But at this point, we've pulled back. But what we found was, firstly, despite the laws, there's the continuous hostility. For example, in Srinagar, when the municipality was working with us to give iCards to waste pickers, the first thing that the media did was to say, why are these outsiders getting iCards? They're not part of this place. So please, it was very scandalous for them. So there's this out, even though waste pickers from Delhi and from Safai Sena actually had been working there at that point, which is 2015 or so, already for 18, 20 years. So I will kind of talk about very briefly what is inclusion from, and I think it's difficult to put any definition of inclusion here because it's so contextual. But I think the first people to ask is the people for whom these policies are and these regulations are being made. So, for example, a lot of women will say that for us, inclusion means a formal contract, access to that waste, and physical space to segregate it. In fact, a study that Chintan did, and Chintan does a lot of doorstep collection in parts of New Delhi, in parts of South Delhi. We've done that all over Srinagar. We've set it up in parts of Rajasthan, in various smaller towns of Rajasthan. And our model typically is that we'll set it up and then we expect someone local to come and take it over because we don't plan to remain in these places forever. But the question that you'll find is when people want space, then they begin to, you should give them space. And, we've seen Bangalore's given it, New Delhi Municipal Council has given it, but they don't want the same models. So, for example, women with space that they can, run a little micro enterprise, earn over 25,000 rupees. But those without that space who are just picking waste door to door are earning less than 15,000. That's a huge, huge difference. So inclusion in some places would be about space, and whenever it's gendered, it's also about flexibility because there's child rearing. I think a huge thing we don't talk about it is how to change the contracts. Whether you look at contracts in Maharashtra, whether you look at contracts in Madhya Pradesh, whether you look at contracts in Delhi, all these contracts talk about essentially the rights and the ownership of waste. And they give that ownership. And this is the biggest problem when you talk of inclusion. They give the ownership to the corporate company who has the contract. And by doing that, you've made already the waste picker who might just pick up a bottle of plastic or a carton, you've already made them illegal. And that almost in the eyes of the law, you've made a black letter law versus tradition. And so you've already caused people to be, it's possible to informally use that contract to extract gratification amounts from waste pickers, because then that waste is no longer theirs. So it makes very little sense to talk of inclusion without talking of fundamentally recontracting everyone, which means not only recontracting what we write in those contracts, it also means recontracting them, for example, and giving them incentives not to pick up the waste that belongs to waste pickers. So I think some of the things that we've done is also about other forms of inclusion. So Chintan worked quite closely, for 3 years, 3 years, I would say, if I included this year, but really intensely till last May with the Social Justice Ministry. And we tried to see how the Namaste scheme, which was actually not for waste pickers, could be reimagined and extended. And we worked with some of the officials there, and together we kind of tried to extend it. And now Namaste is being rolled out everywhere. Even there's a problem because we're seeing it's being rolled out for waste pickers. It can be a game changer because not only does it offer you social security, but it actually acknowledges who you are and and suddenly you become credit worthy in a different way. But it also gives you access to certain kinds of infra and facilities, including material recovery facilities, which brings me kind of to the other kinds of challenges in inclusion. And I don't want to talk about just Chintan all the time, but I want to talk beyond Chintan. So I'm not giving you a lot of examples, but you will see, and I'm happy to share all our reports and all our groundwork, is that actually we ran this project for 3 years and we're still running it, called Climate Sahelis and Climate Sakhis, sorry, and where we trained women waste pickers. And we said, the question they posed to us is that life is so hard, like there's no water. So we train them on climate. We do a lot of work on climate and air pollution. And what we found, much to our shock and horror, was that their resilience couldn't be built up without absolute micro interventions. And who better than them to do it? So we actually worked with them, and we've had a slew of shifts happening because they've been able to identify what government, what agency, what change, and change that. And I think that is inclusion, because then the terms of work are transformed. So you have piped water, you suddenly have drains, you have certain kinds of facilities for children. And all of that then makes a big difference. So that's been our experience. And again, I think a big lacunae in what is inclusion is really about the attitude you see amongst policymakers. So it's a can't do attitude. And, I've been working quite closely, Chintan's been working quite closely with one of the ministries that's coming out with a new rule. And every time we on waste, and waste picker inclusion was something that a lot of people wrote into, but they're plagued by the can't do attitude. And if you're going to do a can't do, then it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy because it reflects in the laws. And so at some point, we really have to look at, not strategically, I would say, not just talk about waste pickers' value, but really talk about circularity and how that will have a crack without a waste picker and a waste dealer, and not to break that chain. So I think there's been, of course, a lot of other policy work we've done. We mostly work at the ground. And finally, I want to talk about just transition, because a lot of this conversation, Pinky is here from Breakthrough, Break Free from Plastic. So sorry. And and that's what she does. And she's, I'm sure, going to talk of plastics. And I think what we think is super important is, we did this study, and I think it's the only kind actually, where we measured across multiple cities what was happening with waste pickers and plastics, and what was the income generated. And we found that a large number of plastics that were actually in the waste stream, between 40 and 61% of a waste picker's income across multiple cities, from the mountains to Delhi, to the south, to the west, came from plastics. That's a lot of money. That's really a lot of money. So as we start banning plastics, and indeed we should, because of the impact it has on health, including the health of waste pickers who drink the least purified water, and from the most contaminated sources, we find that there'll be a huge decline in their income, which basically only pushes them down further into poverty. And you combine that with the kind of extreme heat that we're seeing, which is another area of work that we worked with waste pickers a lot, and looked at extreme heat. And from heat, tried to see that if you really want inclusion, then you have to have a just transition. That just transition comes in 3 or 4, packages. And one of them would obviously be plastics, where you have to look at other kinds of tasks, whether they are reuse, whether they're washing new kinds of packaging, whether they move to composting, or whether they get privileged work around housekeeping. But they have to be very carefully trained, and that training has to be linked with livelihoods of a sector that is currently very low in literacy. But we also have heat. You can't expect waste pickers to even do these alternative jobs with the kind of heat you have, because all our documents are showing that the heat in a slum is actually 5 to 9% greater than outside. So imagine if it's 38 and 40 degrees, you can't live. And there are a lot of deaths from heat, and we know that. But the problem is that you can create cool roofs. Chintan's going to come out with a whole new report next week on its work on heat. But you also need cooler streets. You need better streets. You need to shift the time at which people work, because there's no way, no matter how much you cool a space, it's very difficult to work with under these circumstances. Um, and it's even harder to live, particularly for older people and for infants. So we need cool spaces. We need cool public spaces so that people are able to take up the opportunities that we create. Otherwise, you're creating a form of inclusion that is incomplete, and you're pretending as if climate change is not actually being rolled out, and you're ignoring the needs of the most vulnerable. So I will pretty much end here. I think taken a lot of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for covering kind of broad spectrum of not only what Chintan is working on, but also kind of the whole issue around it, around this informal waste picker. So we will move to the next panelist, Mr. Aditya Vyas. So Aditya, if you can talk about in terms of organizing the informal waste picker at the local level and how your organization is working in terms of social protection and pathways into waste management in the urban setting. Please go ahead, Aditya. The floor is yours.
Yes, hi. So I'm representing KKP, which is Kagat Kach Patra Kashtakari Panchayat. It is a trade union of informal waste pickers, registered in the year 1993. The union is working in the cities of Pune and Pimpri Chinchwad, both located in the western region of India. As Bharti spoke about the context and set the context of, say, the work of informal waste pickers and how this is a global phenomena and a increasing phenomena of, say, the rapid urbanizing and urbanization that is happening. I will zoom in a little bit into the work of KKP and how the waste pickers have organized themselves and how waste pickers have responded to the various changes that have happened over the last 30, 40 years. The first contact with informal waste pickers in Pune happened in the early 90s, where the activists went into the slums to actually engage in adult education and literacy programs, and found out that certain children are sitting far away from other children. And after investigating what the real issue is, found out that these children are children of waste pickers, and then engaging with the waste pickers, going on with the waste pickers on their work, roaming with them, and finding out that the working conditions are bizarre, the long hours of work, the various levels of harassment that also Professor Dubey mentioned, hold very much. And in this situation, the waste pickers are extremely marginalized, vulnerable, and not in a position to advocate for change, really. So I think that was the premise when the waste pickers and the initial activists decided that coming together or organizing into a critical mass, I think, is one of the strategies, creative strategies that we identified, that this is how the waste pickers will demand for any change in their conditions of living, in their conditions of work, and registered themselves as a trade union. Now, registering as a trade union in itself was difficult because there is no employer in this case, and how does a trade union like this exist? But after negotiating the technicalities and working out the legalities of this whole process, registering as a trade union was a major shift in the waste pickers in their own perception as workers. So I think that is when it started, when waste pickers realized that they are contributing to the environment, they're contributing to the city's health. And I think those were the arguments that we initially made to the municipality of Pune and Pimpri Chinchwad, where we said that the waste pickers are doing environmentally important and work that needs to be recognized, and the city has to do that by the bare minimum expectation from the city or the municipality is to issue identity cards. So I think Pune and Pimpri Chinchwad both were the first municipalities in the country in the year 96 when they issued identity cards based on occupation. And based on that, when, say, in the 2000s, where Bharti also mentioned about the Bajaj committee reports and the social and the solid waste management rules that were coming in, that led to the cities cleaning up the open dumping, the containers, and moving towards a doorstep collection, or moving towards a collection model which is based on user fees and so on and so forth. that was also a threat that we, as KKPKP and the waste pickers, realized that we will have to change our working conditions. We will have to be the ones who are also telling the municipality that we are willing to, change and advocate and be willing to set up an alternative model and not just be subject to, getting wiped out by the private players that were then saying that, we will do collection for free. We will do waste collection for free and so on and so forth. KKPKP advocated with the municipal corporation uh, two things. One, in the year 2001, we advocated for medical insurance, saying that again, the waste pickers are protecting the citizens' health, and the municipality owes a health insurance for group health insurance for waste pickers. And then in the year 2005, we piloted with the municipality, saying we will do doorstep collection, and that was a major shift where waste pickers were showing the capability and willingness to move away from a free roaming itinerant waste picking to a model where they would have to be a little more accountable to the citizens, to the municipality. And that is not something that was easy for them also to shift from their initial work where they were used to, or, they did not have a so-called boss or so-called employer, to be more accountable, to be showing up at a citizen's doorstep every morning, and then depending on the service, ask a user fee. So that is something we piloted in the year 2005, and that pilot was successful, and the city realized that this decentralized inclusive model, which was in the form of a cooperative that was jointly registered by the union and the Pune Municipal Corporation, saying that we will engage in a cooperative model where the municipality also has representatives on the board of the cooperative. The trade union also has representatives on the board of the Swachh cooperative, and the cooperative itself is mandated with the responsibility of waste collection across the city. So currently, there are 4,000 waste collectors who are collecting waste from 10 lakh properties in Pune, which is around 70% of the city. In a model where the user fees are paid by the citizens, and the administrative costs of a push cart, of gloves and all, is provided by the municipal corporation. So in a model like this, waste pickers decided to say do a just transition, or to transition into a work where they would not be wiped out entirely, but would engage in a more constructive model which they are owners of, and a cooperative which they are owners of. So I think that is what the learnings were from Pune. And I'm drawing back to my initial point of how this came into being is because of organizing, is because of collectivizing, and it's because of strategizing, that a collective voice, when uh, advocating to the municipal corporation and the elected representatives, leads to a change. And that is perhaps one of the ways in which change can be sought. Uh, Moving on from there, we've with the waste pickers, and we have argued for certain other social welfare benefits, including scholarships for waste pickers' children, including health insurances, including pension schemes of the Pune Municipal Corporation, along with accessing the other state and central government schemes. So right now there are 8 municipal schemes, as 1 central government scholarship, and 23 other government schemes that the waste pickers are entitled to on account of being waste pickers and on account of their occupation being verified by the municipal corporation. So this was one example. The other contrast example, very quickly I'll share, is about the neighboring municipality, which is Pimpri-Chinchwad, where a different type of integration happened, where initially there was the same Swachh cooperative working there, and the city engaging in one half of its jurisdiction with a big, large private corporation, and the other half being the Swachh. So there was a inequality in the manner in which the city engaged, where there was a tipping fee contract with the large corporation, where the citizens did not have to pay any user fees, whereas the Swachh model was where citizens have to pay user fees. So it was not very sustainable, and then we decided to sign out of that process with a demand that whichever corporation or whichever ठेकेदार contractor takes up the work instead of the cooperative, will have to integrate the waste pickers who were working there initially. So that process led to us going to the Bombay High Court, filing a public interest litigation, and getting an order from the Bombay High Court that said that the waste pickers who were working there should be integrated on priority. And that is how 314 waste pickers were integrated in the year 2012. There was another different process of the minimum wages not being paid, and us going to the court to fight for those minimum wage arrears. And I'll share an article link after I speak about how after 12 years of court case and fight, the waste pickers last year received 314 waste pickers received a total sum of 7.5 crores, which was arrears paid by the municipal corporation. So the same trade union engaging in different models of integration into different cities uh, through the common premise that organizing, collectivizing is one of the major strategies through which we can push for change that is meaningful and that works for waste, because in a model where it is more inclusive, decentralized, and able to retain more jobs and more waste pickers and women, which is not, say, the situation where waste management is more, more privatized in the sense, or say more technical, motor transport based models of collection, where it's really the men who then end up taking up and displacing the women. So I think some of these basic premises of inclusion were retained in Pune through the strategy of collectivizing and organizing. There are, of course, one has to keep in mind that different models of integration that are now coming up through self-help groups, through other means where informal waste pickers are getting contracts of, say, sorting, of collection, of being a part of the solid waste management chain. So really it is how the local context is and what has been the history of waste pickers there. One has to keep that in account to actually collectivize and advocate for what is it that truly works for the waste pickers who are based there, rather than proposing grand solutions perhaps that might not work out for the waste pickers, or might not be, or the waste pickers themselves might not be prepared and keen to take up those fights. So I think it is really the zooming in and looking at the local problems with the context of a global setting and what is happening really in the market, in the system of waste management. So I really wanted to share these examples. I will keep it very brief. Happy to answer any questions a little later. I will share three things. I'll share two short films about the story of Swachh and about the history of waste pickers organizing into KKPKP. And a third article about the PCMC example that I spoke about minimum wages and about arrears that were paid by the PCMC. So these three things I'll share in the chat box and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Aditya, for covering the broader spectrum of the work that you are involved in, especially in Pune and other places. So now we move to Mr. Santanu Sahu, who is working on ground in Odisha, if I understand correctly. And then he is going to focus more on, when we talk about these waste pickers, we forget that how much environmental benefit they bring in terms of waste management. So Mr. Sahu is going to highlight that part and other aspects of the work that is being going on. So over to you, Mr. Sahu.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining and giving me the chance to share my thoughts and the work we are implementing in the cities and also the rural pockets. This is the first slide. Just I have my thoughts that we are all talking about the waste pickers, but they are not the waste picker. They are collecting. They are healing the damage we do to the nature. Just they are correcting our mistakes. So I have just compared them to the bees up in the nature who are pollinating and sustaining the ecosystem. And just like waste picker keep our cities alive, working quietly behind the scenes. This is something I have just want to share. Next, please. This is some informal waste pickers backbone, why we are talking about why they are important. They are just and how much they are. Their contribution we all acknowledge, but the respect, the need, we are not giving. So these are some calculations based on the reports of ILO and Global Alliance of Waste Pickers and some important research organizations. So my calculations based on these assumptions. So the waste pickers are this much contributing to our nature and the environment we cherish. Next, please. And I have some calculation. It may be vary according to various researchers and also the calculators. I have taken 353 million tons of year for global waste generation. I have calculated that how much the waste pickers in global contributing at the rate of 60%, and they are contributing 19 million tons per year. And in India, they are contributing 1.98, that is million tons per year, through their work silently. Next, please. And this is the calculation how they are contributing through their work in different aspects. I have calculated this from the reports, different journals and calculations. So according to the waste generation in global and also India, I have estimated the volume collected and diverted by the informal waste pickers, that is 19 million tons per year globally. And in India, it is 1.98 million tons per year. And the virgin plastic reduction also the same as 19 million and 1.9 million tons per year. And CO2 emissions avoided by their work, 28.9 million tons per year, and India, 2.97 million tons per year. And same, the water conserved by diverting and by reducing the virgin plastic production, that is 70.3 billion liters per year, and in India, 7.33 billions per liter. Landfill space saved by their work, 24.7 million meter cube per year, and 3.64 million per meter cube per year in India. And the energy saved by reducing the production of virgin plastics, 422.2 billion kilowatt per hour year. And in India, for India, 44 billion kilowatt per hour per year. And the crude oil saved by reducing the virgin plastic production by their work is 135.25 million barrel per year, and in India 2.97 million barrel per hour. These all the reports are based on the various reports mentioned in the source. Next, please. And then I have calculated them as per individual contribution to the environment by the informal waste pickers. The volume collected and diverted is 1.27, 1.34 ton per year, according to the waste generation, and 80% that is the contribution in India and 60% contribution in globally. Virgin plastic reduction 1.27 tons per 27 per year and 1.32 tons per year. And CO2 emission avoided by individual 1.9 tons per year globally and 1.98 tons per year in India. And water conserved by individual 4.69 million liters per year, and in India 4.89 million liters per year. Landfill space saved 1.65 meter cube per year in globally and 2.43 meter cube per year in India. And same, the energy saved 28.15 million kilowatt hour per year in global, and in India 29.33 kilowatt hour per year. Similarly, the crude oil saved 9.02 barrels per year in global, and in India 1.98 barrels per year. These are calculations shows that how individual waste worker working silently and contributing in the nature we are cherishing. Next, please. This is our, just I want to focus some aspects. We were working from 2019. We were with our funding agency. We recognize the waste pickers working in Bhubaneswar near TTS, and then we organize them, and with our funding agency we establish a MRF center there. We train them, capacity building, and to run the machines to segregate, so to generate more revenues, segregation tricks, and they are now there in 270 peoples, 120 women and 150 men. They are now the important person for successfully running the MRF center. This is now hand over to the BMC, and they are now formalized by the municipality. And now we are also working with in Ganjam, in Chhatrapur, through rural-urban convergence aspect. We are here also mobilizing the local waste pickers, merely inclusive approach. We are now training them to run the machines in the MRF and to run the operations and maintenance of the MRF center through the guidance of our staff, trained staff. And now we are also integrating them to other well centers established through in rural areas by GPs, and there are also working waste pickers and the women SHG groups. They are now giving training to them, organizing them, and trying to integrate with them. This is how we now not calling them waste pickers. We are now calling them Safai Mitras, a dignified name. We also provide ID cards, and also we have provided dignity cards in which all the schemes of the government, state government and central government have been listed out, and how many schemes they are availing, that also point out, and we are sharing also the ULBs and the government. So now we believe in recognizing them, empowering them, and integrating with them so that they will run their business, run their work, and also bargain for their work. Next, please. This is the picture. This the first picture is that the land was the dump site of ULB, and they have given the land for work of the rural setup. We have established the MRF center and engaged the local waste pickers there and train them, capacity building up there for running the MRF center. And now they are going to the other well centers in the rural areas and also in the urban areas, and training the SAGs, the women workers working in the respective ULBs for the MRF center. This is how we are trying to empower them and also integrate them to the system of formalized waste management.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Santanu. Very good presentation on the different stuff that you're working on. So without further delay, we'll directly jump to Pinky. You have the toughest task now to kind of talk about plastics. And I would request you that whatever you have already seen the questions on the Q&A. So while you are presenting your initial thoughts, if you can touch upon some of those questions, that would be great as well. Please go ahead, Pinky.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to also share that I'm going to be tying up, from what you've heard from the different speakers. And the first part that Bharti brought to the fore was invisibilization. So while we've all seen the physical, tangible aspect of waste that is visible, active, and it influences the political and urban landscape, the intangible aspect of waste that is invisible. And that is one of value transformation, something that is discarded through retrieval, categorization, aggregation, transportation, and trading. And second is about the people that work in informal space. And when you talk about invisibilization, I just wanted to share my own experiences with that. This was way back in 2010, as somebody who used to run a community radio station and was involved with a lot of social causes. Solid waste management was one of it, and we, as citizens of Bangalore, had proposed this idea of running a dry waste collection center, which Bharti made a reference to in her presentation. And we were very proud and very happy that the fact that we were proposing something to the government that we thought would be useful. And in one of the meeting, like what Bharti mentioned, Anselm Rosario, he was also part of the meeting. He invited my colleague Nalini Shekhar to this meeting. And Nalini was also one of the co-founders of Swatch, KKPKP, which Aditya is from. So she visited us, and while she came in, she was very warm, hospitable, smiling and all of that. As the meeting progressed, she started shaking her head, and her body language changed. She crossed her arms, and she was very, very unhappy. So after the meeting finished, I went out to her and I was like, Nalini, what's wrong? And she's like, how can you people even talk about waste without waste pickers? And that's when I realized that in my zeal to do good, I had completely invisibilized waste pickers. And it happens to the best of us that we are advocating for a policy change without even realizing the people around it. We have to question who works in waste and why. And I think Bharti really provided that context. The second one is of the language. Bharti made a reference to the whole term that is rack pickers. And I'll share the article that I'd written. And when I was talking to Mansoor, who is one of who's a micro entrepreneur working with waste in Bangalore, he asked me this question. He's like, what comes to your mind when you use the word rack picker or scavenger to describe the art of collecting and gathering? And here, he said, I'm asking you to describe the visual image that comes to your mind. He said, just be honest. Imagine, what would you imagine? Would the image conjure something of pity, disgust, sympathy, bordering on hatred, anger, or dirtiness? So, like what Bharti said, in way back in 2008, the term was waste picker was adopted. And what Mansoor also says, he says that I feel bad when people use the word rack pickers or chapper, as it immediately creates a strong visual. The word chapper is given to mean a person carrying stolen goods on the shoulder. And he said, 15, 16 years since the term has been adopted, it's sad that old world still rule. And so, like when I was talking to another colleague of mine, ex-colleague of mine, Rohini, she said, even in unguarded conversations, we say waste pickers. People repeat back. People, I'm saying anybody, like what Bharti mentioned, media sensationalization, they repeat back saying rack pickers. So I think that what is really important for us is to really look at language, because there is politics involved in language, but there's also aspiration involved in language. We must be conscious about using the right language, especially when talking about waste pickers, because it's also about agency, it's also about dignity, it's also about respect. We are talking about policy. And when you look at policy, Professor Dubey mentioned policy exclusion, isolation, and the fact about policy, we've heard from Aditya about organizing and how is it important for collective voice to happen. Right now, if you look back, 2011 was the first plastic waste management rules when waste pickers definition was present in the rules. We had to wait till 2016 for the SWM rules to have waste pickers in it. And then there were a lot of policy, there were a lot of things within the SWM 2016 rules. Plastic waste management rule 2016 had waste pickers. Then we had the EPR regime. Within the EPR regime, what happened when it came about? Waste pickers were totally cut off. There were no mention till there was advocacy that happened for waste pickers to be included in, and it came about only as an amendment in 2024. So you can see the policy gaps, because if I go back to history again, KKPKP, SMS in Bombay, Chintan, Reds, or Maitri Seva Samiti, which was Anselm Rosario, have always spearheaded mobilization of waste pickers for livelihood development and formal recognition. And they've also championed a lot of methods, to include. And they have been always looking at it from a rights-based approach, right? Identity and recognition, which is occupation cards, right to waste. And this is a very important point, because as new models come in, for instance, now somebody's asked a question about global plastic treaty. Even with the plastic treaty discussion, people are now pitching to move to reuse solutions. Again, the whole angle of right to waste, right to material, as somebody said, material security comes to the fore. You've heard from Aditya, you've heard briefly from Bharti, but you also, and from Shantanu, but even Hasrudala had the same this thing. There is right to organizing. You need to form collectives, trade unions, cooperative, SHGs, social enterprises. Why? Because waste pickers need to be recognized as entrepreneurial, not somebody who can be employed. So I think that distinction is important. You need right to sorting places, you need earmarked infrastructure. Which master plan in the city really has that space? Right to representation, you need that governments has to ensure that waste pickers are consulted, because when you make policy without consulting, what's the point? Then, of course, right to training, capacity building, skill building. But the important thing that I need to also talk about is what Krishna, another waste, who was a former child waste picker, now a dry waste collection center operator, he said, when you're talking about EPR and when you're looking at this whole context of EPR where waste pickers were not really included in it, he said we talk about producer responsibility and stewardship, and in terms of environment and economic angle, right? But there's more pressing issue and that needs to be addressed, and that is of social cost and justice. We often fail to recognize that waste is also a social priority, and it's intricately connected with the SDGs, with the culture, with the politics. And I think COVID actually amplified that need for social environmental stewardship. Going back to the point, you cannot look at policy in isolation just to solve one issue. It has to be looked at from different loops. You have to look at intersection, and it has to be multi-stakeholder. And contributions, Shantanu has already given us like one broad expanse of contributions. I think way back, I don't know which year was it, but I think Bharti came out with the first report, which was schooling agents. And very recently, Hasrudala also looked at waste picker contributions from a GHG mitigation. So when I say isolation, you don't look at waste as only waste. Look at waste in totality of climate. Look at waste in totality of right to health. Look at waste in totality of anything that you would want, especially when you're talking about rights for you as a citizen, and that is very important. And I think before I conclude, I just want to also share that I just want to conclude by stating what Krishna had mentioned to me. He said, with the right support, we waste pickers and other informal recyclers can become key enablers in solving any problem. I mean, he said it in terms of plastic problem, but he said we need to be invited to the table to discuss policies that affect our livelihood. And until, and I repeat, you see us as partners, this problem is not going anywhere. So you will have a legislation like the e-waste rules, which will be totally cut off from the realities of what's happening on the ground. So you have to look at them as partners. And lastly, I just want to say the importance of voice. So you've listened to us today from the people who've been on this field. The next time, I would invite B-Waste to invite waste pickers for this webinar to you listen to them in terms of their experiences. Many of our waste pickers have represented COP, they are representing the Global Plastic Treaty, so there's much more to it. So I'll stop here. And just one question that I needed to answer. Yes, there are a lot of solutions coming. There are a lot of co-opting happening. Both Aditya and Bharti made some references to different forms of integration, but we need to be really careful to sift through, is this only tokenism? Is it only, is that, taking agency away from waste picker is the question that we need to answer. So thank you.
Thank you, Pinky, for very nicely kind of summarizing and also putting some kind of taking care of some of the questions from the question and answer session as well. So we'll jump directly into the question Q&A because we are already kind of at the end scheduled time, but we'll extend it for another 15 minutes to take the Q&A. So if you look at the Q&A section, there is a question on EPR, like how can the informal sector be effectively included in EPR scheme for the different waste stream? And are there effective strategies or examples of successful approaches in practice? And we can take that question along with, that was question from Natasja, sorry. And then Professor Kurian Joseph has a question on, like, is there a model of inclusive participation of waste picker as per the solid waste management rules? So is there any link for relevant documentation? So kind of solid waste management rules as well as our EPR. So how we can get this informal sector involved. So you can start and maybe Bharti can chime in or yeah, please go ahead, Pinky.
I think Bharti can go ahead and I'll add.
No, I think if you can just go ahead, I'm just fixing, I'm trying to move to my phone Wi-Fi. Please go ahead.
Okay, so when you deconstruct EPR in the current form that it is, in terms of recognition of actors, there's very clearly the brand owners, the producers, yes, the PIBOs, the producers, brand owners, importers, PIBOs, yeah, and they are recognized. In addition, you have the waste processors and recyclers. But we need to go back and look at the pyramid of how the informal recycling system is structured. And it's very important to start at the base. What we've done is we've just gone on top. And I think ignoring that whole base of the pyramid is going to be problematic, because I think it was section 14 of the PWM rules, which actually talks about brand owners, the PIBOs can also come up with their own collection system, which includes deposit return system, buyback schemes, etc., etc. And so then, and anybody who's collecting should hand over the waste to the PIBOs. Now, in this model, what happens is you are basically exploiting, because there is no market mechanics in play. There is no rate that goes directly into the waste pickers. So what are you really doing? So somebody else is collecting, so there is labor involved in that collection. The material, when you sell it in a free market, has different rates as opposed to the rates within the EPR collection. So I think we need to just relook at this whole model to see how inclusion can truly work, where waste pickers get the right, not just of collection of waste, but also to get the right of the market rates that they need to get with some kind of social security net. Because like what happened during some key, like COVID, for instance, when everything was shut, there was absolutely nothing. So how do you enable that whole system within the EPR system to make sure that there is that kind of social safety net available?
So, Bharti, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, if I may, can you hear me? Can anyone
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
me?
you're good. You're good. Yes.
Okay, I'm on a phone, a very strange phone network. So, yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. Thank you, Pinky. That was important. I think what's also important is waste pickers are not, the idea of traceability. And, the owners at this point, a lot of the solutions are, oh, the waste pickers should get this right. But then, of course, there's no question. But the point is, you're only making it harder and harder for waste pickers. In fact, most waste pickers in the country, in India, are not organized in any way whatsoever. And so they're anyway going to be excluded. So I think we need much more focus on traceability, because traceability can then be incentivized. And how you define traceability should really go down to the last neighborhood. And that's how waste pickers actually can get some more money. The other thing is that I think all the money under EPR is going into other kinds of inputs, like credits for the recyclers. I think we really have to have sliding credits, so that while the recyclers take something, we also need a sliding, just like a sliding tax system, so that informal sector, through traceability mechanisms, which actually should be made mandatory, can actually stake a claim, because there's just no other way. Otherwise, it's all just getting eaten up in the middle. And the third thing is, it's not just prices. Of course, prices are very important, but credits, because sometimes you don't collect enough to get the kind of credits that, make a lot of money. But I think we just have to look at, even if we got a little money from EPR credits, the plastic credits, for example, aren't trickling down. At this point, it's so unfortunate that so many years later, we're talking about how waste pickers need to sell and be included. But the inclusion is not only for their services and their labor and their materials, but it should also be for credits. Otherwise, EPR credits are not trickling down to the bottom. And that is absolutely, it's a great way, it's a great example of exclusion. And for that, we really need investment in setting a system, because a lot of the nonprofits or the sanstha's or the organizations working with waste pickers, I mean, it's really overwhelming to set up these kinds of documentations. So I think it's important to conflate these kinds of needs for documents with the other kinds of social security and namaste and all of those, so that every waste picker basically is attached to some database that will only increase their resilience and income.
So good. So in terms of, there are a lot of other questions there which we'll be trying to answer in whatever the time we have left. So there has been some question that in terms of, see, many of these informal sector, we call, they don't have proper documentation, so that they're non-residents or non-native. So they have very little, so they don't try to engage with the government department in case, even if the government department tries to create a better situation for them, for the lack of credibility or maybe afraid. So how you have handled that issue on the ground? Like maybe Aditya, if you have some experience, you can share how those issues are handled on the ground.
Yeah. So in our context, the around close to 95% of the waste pickers are from the same state, which is the state of Maharashtra. And of course, initially there was no document, there was no piece of a single document that was available. But because of the language, because of, say, being able to fetch certain older records from their native villages, and also through the, but that was also very rare. But finally, verifying the waste pickers as waste pickers from the ULB, I think that also allowed them to get access to various other documents. Right now, the thing is that finally, if there is any one document, there are ways to get other documents based on that one single document. There are very minute fine print ways. Like for example, if a waste picker today has no Aadhaar card, so there is an option to go to the collector to get the local elected representative to issue an affidavit saying this person lives here. If initially the waste pickers' children did not have any birth certificates and documents and all, but there are ways to get the state hospital and the local hospitals to check their bone density, to check their teeth, and give a range of age and then admit them into schools. So these are some things that we have tried based on the context and the need of the type of document. Right now, most of the waste pickers have at least one document, and based on that, they're able to get other documentation in place. In areas where waste pickers are not a vote bank for the politicians, it becomes even more difficult to get any documents in place. It becomes much more difficult in areas like Delhi or Bangalore, where there's migration from other states. There's factors of religion, there's factors of biases, and being labeled as say in India, there's being meaning there are waste pickers who are labeled as Bangladeshi and immigrants and all of that. So these all challenges are very real, and one really just has to look at what kind of document is available, what kind of MLA or member of parliament is there and supportive or not supportive. So really it is, I think, the actual local grassroots fine print. Now with a scheme like Namaste, which Bharti also very elaborated in detail, the scheme has the provision to verify waste pickers where they are at the place of work. It need not be, waste pickers need not be living in the same ULB to be able to get verified. So even waste pickers who have migrated from other cities, other states, have the provision to get verified under the scheme like Namaste, which is the first such scheme of any central government linked body to verify waste pickers and recognize them. So I think with these large policy level inclusions and shifts, one can really leverage in today's time and get access to other documents and other, means of accessing more and more social welfare and more benefits of citizenship.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe Santanuji, if you want to answer this, or anyone, like there is a question there in terms of like the rate of recyclable, the economics has to work, isn't it? So the rate of recyclables fluctuates a lot. So what could be done about that? In fact, one of the participant is suggesting that should we have a standardized rate from some agency so that it does not fluctuate that much. And then the biggest question, which is asked everywhere we do this kind of workshop or this kind of webinar, is how to make sure better source segregation coming from home so that we can do better recycling. So based on your experience, if you want to share something, please go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, the best option is to say promote awareness sessions in the households so that they are in the source they are segregated. It will be better for every. And for this, we have conducted the household level awareness campaigns through local natak, through street plays, in the areas, gray areas, where we identified that there is most people are not segregating. Then we intensify awareness campaigns we conducted. We included the local persons who are which voice is more acceptable in their localized, so that it ensure that some of the many people come out with good practices. And even then, whoever we find out through the ULB officers, then we fine system we establish, so that many households now, 90% household are now segregating their waste.
So thank you. So maybe I think we can go back to Bharti or Pinky. If you can talk about, is there a repository outside? Like there is a question from like Tanzania, where they are looking for how to do this capacity building of like a local informal sectors for in terms of better how to run the MRF centers better. So is there a repository available from the work that you have done, which people can use, say in African countries and other places? So that's that will be real. So if you can set some lights on that. Yeah, Bharti, please go ahead.
So, yeah, thanks. So I'm happy. I haven't shared anything here at all, unfortunately. But if I could share, maybe somebody could put my email down. But there, I'm happy to share trainings that we've made with NIUA, and we can train the trainers to do this anywhere, because it's and some of the data will have to be replaced from India to Tanzania or whatever the local context is, but we're happy to train trainers to work with this.
Yeah, so maybe you can share that information with Akansha, and then she can pass it on to that person who asked that question, because Akansha has email address of all the participants when they registered. So thank you for that.
Oh,
so maybe the
lovely.
yeah. So maybe the last question, although there are a couple of few more questions out there, but I would request those. Vanita Prasad had a question like most MSW segregated organic waste is crucial. Which model works to get the waste from residential society? So maybe we can talk like for some of those questions, you can write to us and we can respond to that. For the interest of time, we'd like to stop in a couple of minutes. So like just last question to maybe Pinky, see, one thing as an academic, I feel like, or maybe many of the professors like me, we feel that there needs to be a proper marriage between informal and formal sector, where informal sector does a wonderful job in terms of collection of different material, and the formal sectors can come in and do the value added resource recovery with the proper technology, proper health and safety, especially seeing electronic waste and those kind of aspect, where informal sector still does not have that technological know-how. So how possible is that? Of course, I know that it's a complex in terms of business challenges, business model, but will that happen?
So I'm only quoting from experiences of all my waste picker colleagues. And when when the Global Plastic Treaty discussion started, nobody told the waste pickers about the ILO model of just transition. We had convened the waste pickers. I mean, they all gathered together and they were articulating. And I'm sharing that document with you, and they came out with 11 principles, 8 of which was what ILO had recommended. So, in terms of articulation, the way they defined it was exactly in tune with what ILO had recommended. And in addition, what their demands was basically for, for three things. One of it was there is a time for change, which is very important for smooth transition. training is an important factor. And third, technology and social networking are important if work is to change over time. So, what they're trying to say is don't tell us that just because we are not formally educated doesn't mean that we cannot access technology. I remember way back in 2011 12, Mansoor, whom I mentioned to you, he got onto Facebook. At that point in time, he did not know to type, but through Facebook, and now he's on Instagram, he got onto Twitter, he got his own YouTube channel. He started talking about how should residents segregate waste and why you should follow this practice. During COVID, there was another waste picker, Kumuda, who made an appeal video on and circulated on WhatsApp, basically stating that please understand everybody's scared, but this is how you need to segregate because there is a risk to us as well. You can't put in gloves in the dry waste. You can't put in your mask in your dry waste. Be a little bit more respectful. And I do realize, so there are ways of how technology is used. There are waste pickers in Bangalore, for instance, who've used different kinds of apps to look at traceability that Bharti was mentioning. There are waste pickers now who are also filing income tax. They've had access to loan. So what we are trying to say is we need to create an enabling condition. We don't need somebody sitting over someone because then you're undermining their entrepreneurial abilities. They're undermining their opportunities to grow. We take great pride when say, oh, so and so is a school dropout, but look at him, he's a multimillionaire, or he's an entrepreneur, he's a businessman. It's the same respect that we need to afford to all the people who are very different from us, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't think so.
Thank you.
Technology is a barrier. It just needs training. It just needs that enabling.
Thank you. Thank you very much for Pinky for that final word. So with that, we would like to, because we do respect the time of all the participants and the panelists. So for the interest of time, we will wrap it up and I'll hand it back to Akansha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pinky. Thank you, Bharti. Thank you, Aditya and Shantanu, for taking time out and being part of this very informative panel. I think this is the first time that BVS Wise has been hosting and taking up this particular topic, which we never ever discussed so far. And considering India as a context, it was very valuable for all the attendees as well as for us to get an insight from all the experts. As I mentioned, that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and on our website. If you would like to, stay updated on future events, then we request you to please subscribe to our newsletter and follow on social media. And thank you all for being part of this webinar and staying long, even it is beyond our time limit. But I can see a lot of attendees are still part of this discussion and, are there taking interest. There are some unanswered questions which we will pass on to the speakers and we'll get them answered. Thank you so much for your time. Have a very great day ahead.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Bharti.
So it was okay, isn't it? It was